Essentially, you always have two choices. Am I following fear or am I following love? So, love represents the desire, the thing that you want to expand into. Fear represents the cycle that you're recreating. So, if you
Mm.
just take a moment to pause and ask the question, am I choosing love or am I choosing fear? And that will create space for you to slow down the decision making process and really evaluate, am I saying yes to this because it's the safe bet? Or am I saying no to this because I'm afraid of if I do say yes to it, what will happen?
All right. Welcome back to the 1% Better podcast. We have an extremely special guest on today. Anik, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Chuck. It's great to be here with you.
So, today, what we're going to be doing is exploring how personal empowerment is rooted in self awareness, but also the power of the subconscious mind is part of small intentional changes. But before we even get into that, I would love for you to dive a little bit deeper on your background and really what got you to this point for your journey and what you focus on.
So my focus of work is supporting solo professionals and conscious organizations to integrate purpose, prosperity for impact without compromising their values. So I lead them through deep inner work, intuitive intelligence, and strategic insights to empower the leaders to cultivate alignment, to make confident decisions, and to drive sustainable success. And for me, that is the embodiment of empowerment, whether
Mm,
it's empowerment in your professional life or in your personal life. And so, what really got me into this work was a journey of my own. I used to work on the stock market. And then, when I really tuned in to my inner knowing, I recognized that deep feeling of dissatisfaction that I was experiencing, regardless of like the success that I had created in my career was really leading me in a different direction. And that's when I discovered some of my most favorite gifts that I get to share is pattern recognition, communicating and understanding how the subconscious mind works, and really supporting people in utilizing and awakening the gifts within them to
mm.
create a life that's not just sustainable, but also very prosperous because it's a win win win. You're showing up as your best self, and then everybody benefits from that. And that's where sustainable growth is really comes from, in my opinion.
Incredible. So much to unpack there. You talk about the inner compass and finding your true north. And with this inner compass, it's really a key for personal empowerment. But most people, I would say, most people feel disconnected to their intuition. I know I have at points. A number of people around me. For people that are looking to get back to connected, what is the biggest sign someone is out of alignment from or with their inner compass, and what is the process of recalibrating that?
So one of the biggest signs is you'll feel off.
Mm,
You'll work hard, you'll do all the things, and you won't seem to get any traction. So I'm going to like across the board, something's off. Often the challenge is figuring out what to do about it.
yeah.
And one of the biggest instruments of development that I would say to recalibrate your inner compass is intuitive discernment, because the way that I've learned to understand it and how I like to share with people is your inner compass gets two sets of data. One from your higher mind, which is your higher intelligence,
Mhm.
the higher self, if you will, that you want to listen to. And then you have your set of data that's from your instinct, which is your reptilian mind or the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response.
Mm,
And when those two are in alignment, well, then you're in sync. Alignment's easy. And so most of the time, those two sets of data speak to each other or are in sync with each other. when it becomes problematic and how people lose trust in their inner compass is they're listening to that reptilian mind, that instinct, which is like, run, this opportunity is a bad idea. It's going to move us into uncertain, uncharted territory, which also includes lots of opportunities, instead of the higher mind that will whisper, you know, but what if you fly?
Uh,
What if you soar? And so for many of us, that instinct is such a powerful no, knee jerk reaction that will tend to think, oh, well, I'm feeling my gut is saying I shouldn't do this.
mm.
But the higher mind, when you start to develop your capacity to discern between those two voices, and we'll often see like the devil and the
Yeah,
angel.
that
So
was exactly what I was thinking about.
yeah, so you'll often see, so it's about knowing which voice you're listening to. And so one of the work where I really focus with my clients, and especially in the trainings that I do, is that intuitive discernment.
Mhm.
Because once you have that discernment, you can make decisive choices about the best way forward, knowing that you're not repeating a fear cycle. Because your fear is going to tell you to stay where you are because it's a known experience, even if it's seated in suffering.
Yeah.
Whereas your higher mind will lead you to the opportunities that you're seeking, but it's not pushy about it.
It takes you to a certain point, and then you almost have to make that decision for yourself with going beyond whether you are going to go in that flight or fight mode, which I find very fascinating with now that I'm approaching 36, and I now have a little bit of a resume of life under my belt, and seeing where those patterns have happened. What my friends will call sometimes cold feet, whether to move forward or not. And I think so many people do chase this external validation, titles,
Mhm.
money, approvals. Like you mentioned, you were on Wall Street. I've had
It's
diff-
Spark Street and it was I'm in Canada, so it's a
yeah,
different street,
yeah,
but same
different.
premise. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the clarification. Without realizing they're moving in the wrong direction, I think a lot of the time with when you are chasing these tangible things. Can you share I would love to know a personal moment where you ignored your inner compass and what it took to finally really listen to it.
Oof. So many options. Before I get into that, I want to share like a one tangible example because you did
Oh,
ask that. I
please.
want to give our audience like, so how do I even start? And
Yeah.
so without any training or experience needed, if you just pause for a second and ask, am I following my essentially, you always have two choices. Am I following fear or am I following love? So, love represents the desire, the thing that you want to expand into. Fear represents the cycle that you're recreating. So, if you
Mm,
just take a moment to pause and ask the question, am I choosing love or am I choosing fear? And that will create space for you to slow down the decision making process and really evaluate, am I saying yes to this because it's the safe bet? Or am I saying no to this because I'm afraid of if I do say yes to it, what will happen? So I just wanted to kind of insert that in there as a here's a quick takeaway is the pause
yeah.
and the asking the right question, the question of discernment, like, am I listening to the angel or am I listening to the devil here?
Yeah, I like to practice meditation. So
Mhm.
I would love to take what you just mentioned right there and put it into my own practice
Yes.
and I do 10 minutes. It's not like I do an hour or
Mhm.
anything like that, but I feel I get so much more in balance with what I need to accomplish and almost mentally prioritizing things and being able to understand where I'm at just with those 10 minutes a day. It's
Mhm.
amazing what it just pausing and going inward instead of outward really does for yourself and the improvements it allows you to get to.
Mhm. It's such a powerful tool, and what's fun is you don't need anything to do it,
Nothing.
right? Just even just you and your breath is great.
Yeah.
And what I like to do, because a lot of people say, well, Anik, I don't have this amount of time to incorporate all of these self-care strategies. Like I'm already maxed out. And so one of the things that I like to suggest is, that pause. We have this natural reaction to want to give somebody an immediate answer on everything, as like just like you're saying, the external validation, right? We feel like we need to meet this expectation of having a ready answer. And it's like give yourself permission to pause for 3 seconds, to not provide, even though you might already know what the answer is, get in the habit of taking that 3 seconds or 10 seconds to tune in before you give the response, right? Even though it might be the same one that you got in immediately, to really keep checking in with yourself, because that's you developing that muscle of discernment. So, um, how many, like, which time that I'm trying to narrow down of which time I didn't listen to my intuition, I ended up paying for it. It's like so many times. And I think that's why I come from a place of understanding and compassion, because I'm like, hey, and I'm probably still going to do it some more, even though
Always.
I
Yeah.
know better. One of the things in this current business, so I work in intuition, and so even with everything that I know, like I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago, there was like new trends. Social media shifted, the algorithm changed, and there's a lot of new trends on this is what you have to do in order to reach your audience. And I didn't pause to check in to see, yes, but is this in alignment with my values and with what I love to do? And so for 6 or 8 months, I followed trends that all of the other people were getting great success with, and I grinded into it. And I was just like, this isn't fun anymore. And I was like, why am I doing this? And I realized that I didn't check in with myself. There was so much external data saying this is the path forward. And I was like, "Well, I don't really understand the algorithms." But what I neglected to recognize is the success that I had created in my business was not because I was chasing trends. It's because I was staying in integrity with my values and showing up in that energy. And that's what resonated with my ideal clients. So even while I was chasing the here's what you need to do, I wasn't attracting my ideal clients. And I was working much harder and getting worse results. And so it took a moment for me to check in and be like, oh, shoot, I did the thing I wasn't supposed to do. So for me, it reinforced the importance of really staying true to your values and your to stay in integrity of that, regardless of what the external environment is showing you.
I find that so interesting because these external forces, whether it be a title, money, or social media, algorithms, trends, friends, anything what people are saying of what people should do, where it's the complete opposite when we really think about it. If you do what is true to you, is where the true success comes from, or it grows from there,
Always.
instead of trying to follow the crowd. When you end up going inward and looking at what is best for, let's just say myself, what's best for Chuck Connors, that's when you maximize your opportunities of what you can truly become.
Exactly. And it's not that you're gonna reinvent the wheel, and I think there's a misinterpretation that you have to, like, do everything uniquely yours.
Yeah.
Use the models that you are guided towards, but make it your own.
Yeah.
Bring your own personality and your own vision to it, and tweak it in a way that feels right and accommodates your needs, your values, your desires. Because if I'm spending hours editing a TikTok, which I'm not even on, that is not sparking joy within me,
Yeah.
right? So I'm like, I'm doing something that I don't like. B, I'm not even on TikTok, so my ideal client probably isn't either,
Yeah.
right? And those sorts of things. But because it was such a big trendy thing, I'm glad that I had that awareness before, because then it was like the next thing was the TikTok, and I was just like, you know what? I'm not feeling it. And so I'm going to agree to disagree that this is not right for me. And even though there's a lot of people like, oh, you should totally get on this, Anik, and like your education is so important, you have so much to say, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, yeah, but it's not ringing true for me.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I I love how you mentioned you don't have to reinvent the wheel, because that's a lot of what I've been doing, of how I wrote the book on,
Mm,
it's my point of view, my
mhm.
perspective on all these things that have been talked about in a thousands of different ways. And same thing with
Yes.
a podcast.
Mhm,
There's millions of podcasts out there, but I was like, you know what? This is my perspective. This is how I'm approaching it. It's going to be a little
mhm,
bit different for how I like to flow with things. So I find so much powerful with that. And where I'd love to talk about next is really the subconscious mind,
mm,
and really breaking free from old patterns. Before we hopped on, we were talking about breaking free from kind of the tradition of our family's time management and how people do things. So you described the subconscious mind as the mega computer, and I love that term, mega computer.
mhm.
And a lot of the time, it's running on outdated programming. And it needs updating. If someone's listening right now and feels in the cycle or the cycles of self sabotage,
Mhm.
where should they start to update that programming?
One of the biggest and the first step, and I want to say 80% of the work is the awareness of it.
Mhm.
So the more awareness they can bring to the pattern, the more they can diffuse that pattern. So think of it as you're riding a bike and then you throw a stick in the wheels, in the spokes. Right? You really want to disrupt that pattern. Now there's a lot of different processes to one of the processes that I use to reprogram the subconscious mind. It's called theta healing. So we tune in to between 4 and 8 hertz, which is the frequency and the language of the subconscious. It's kind of a cousin to hypnosis, and it kind of in as a brief um um really as a brief way of describing it. And what we do is we see new patterns, but we don't go there until we have an awareness of, okay, so how is this pattern serving you? Because one of the things that I've discovered about the subconscious mind is the subconscious mind is not a jerk on purpose. According to your subconscious mind, it's blowing up your life and it's the best employee ever. And it's like, hey, here you go. You're welcome. I kept you safe. I'm like, give me a gold star. I'm employee of the month. And then on a conscious level, we're like, what is wrong with me? Why is this not working? And I like to think of the subconscious mind as like the elephant, whereas the conscious mind is the mouse. Because the reality is there's no fighting with your subconscious that's ever going to get you anywhere, because it controls 90 to 95% of your energy. So when we think about the three minds, whether that's your brain, your heart, and your gut, the subconscious is the overall interconnector to all of these different systems. So it's like that's why when you get stressed out, you sometimes, have indigestion or your heart rate increases. Like everything's interconnected, and that mega computer, your control system, mission control, if you will, is the subconscious. So what we want to do is we want to befriend the subconscious and retrain that employee to be like, hey, this process that you're using to create it to keep us safe is actually creating suffering. Here's a new process. So as a layman, if you will, the biggest and the first step is, okay, what's my catalyst? What's the downward spiral? Where is my rock bottom? And what am I getting out of this? Because that's how
Mm.
the subconscious looks at it. The When you distill it down, it doesn't matter what it is, the catalyst is always seated in a fear of some sort. Otherwise, the subconscious would do it. So the subconscious doesn't create a pattern for no reason. That's what I've discovered from working on it, and with it in depth with thousands of people. It's like it all just comes down to
And
it
you
doesn't feel
just have
safe.
to find that root of
Yeah,
where it
exactly.
started. And then I really like what you mentioned, 80% is really the awareness, because I think
Mhm.
that is such a controllable thing for a lot of people, to take a step back. Why am I
Yeah.
stressed? What is causing me to feel uncomfortable? And really just pausing for, as we were mentioning before you answer a question, 3 seconds, and just
Mm,
being centered for a moment, and understanding what am I going to respond to. And I'm already thinking about how do I take that into. So if I start pausing for a second on this podcast, you know why I'm doing it.
Yes.
um, most of our beliefs are really formed in childhood too. I could think of a lot of situations even in my life now that it's almost like a trigger. I'll go back to when I was 10 years old or 9 years, any in those early years, yet we rarely question those times. It's more of just a remembrance, but it's not questioning, is that causing what's happening right now? What's one or beliefs where you've uncovered yourself that was completely holding you back, and how did you rewrite the story?
One of the deep beliefs, and everybody, doesn't matter where you're from, has this in some form, is the social and the genetic beliefs that you're born into. So most of the subconscious programs that create your foundational belief structure are developed between 0 and 7. So depending on your upbringing, and especially what was modeled to you by your guardians, you, as much as people don't like to hear you're just like your father, you're just like your mother, there's probably a seed of truth to that to bring awareness into. So for me, one of the things that I really recognized was this perception of class. We're like, oh well, we're not these people in society. And so that was really modeled, my both my parents as entrepreneurs, as well, we don't have it easy because we're entrepreneurs, so we have to trailblaze, so we have to work hard. It's like no pain, no gain. So all of the typical entrepreneurial belief structures is like, like if you don't work, you don't make money, you can't rely on people. There's so many beliefs that I had to unravel and reprogram in order to build and create a thriving business, right?
Yeah.
Because if I harbor the belief of I can't rely on anybody and I might as well just do it myself, well,
Exactly.
then that's not fun, right?
Yeah.
Like I need a team to support me in the highest and best way. Now, thankfully, with the tools that I've trained in, um, I've had the capacity to rewrite those programs. But at the beginning, when I started bringing on team members, I was like, ooh, what's the resistance here? Why am I always attracting the same type of issues? And I was just like, oh, well, these are the types of beliefs that I have. So it filters who I'm choosing in my onboarding process. So it's
Interesting.
very subtle, but it's actually a very powerful thing when you start to really take a look at it and bring awareness to it. It was like, wow, even how I was selecting people, I was subconsciously selecting people that would meet my expectation of they're going to let me down.
Wow.
So, of course, then I was like, I need to get rid of these programs. And, like I'm worthy of being supported. What I have to share in the world is relevant. It's important. It's impactful. And really, and a lot of that, what I've learned from being an entrepreneur and a business owner is the more work you do on yourself, the better your business is. So whether you're a professional or an entrepreneur or a CEO, when you're in a good spot, everything you do is great,
Trickle
right?
down
You
effect.
rise to the surface and become the cream of the crop, no matter what industry you're in. And so for me, it was like, okay, what's the inner work that I need to do? Because I seem to have a pattern here.
Yeah.
Right. So I started to notice that. And that was both a social and a genetic pattern that I held within me because of what I was raised in the 80s. So it was like totally no pain, no gain era. And by two entrepreneurs. And it was like, there's no free handouts. Like you're going to grind. And it was really the hustle, mentality.
Yeah, the big hustle culture, which is
Exactly.
huge, where
Yeah.
it's like, sleep? What's sleep?
Hmm.
Breaks? There's no
Yeah.
breaks. You need
Hmm.
water? Water's for the weak. Like all these these old ways of thinking,
Hmm.
and really not looking at what is best for yourself. And I think I love how you mention when you are, let's just say, a CEO and it trickles down to other people and things like that. I look at that same type of analogy for sports. The
Mm.
best the best organizations win championships, but it starts at the top.
Yes.
starts at the owner, and then it goes down to the general manager, and then it goes down to the coaches that are put in place. And those coaches are reflective of the players and the types of go to market or game plan that they are approaching everything with. I think about that a lot. Of why is this not working? Why is it working? And typically, if you want to reverse engineer it, go back to that point, and you can really learn a lot. When people hear reprogramming your mind, they often think of affirmations and vision boards. Uh, but you say that true change really does happen much deeper than that.
Absolutely. Now, I love my affirmations and my vision
I
boards
do too.
as much as everybody else. But here's what I want to just explain about how the mind works is when you're saying an affirmation, you're doing it on a conscious level. So you're saying it in the to the conscious mind, which is the 5%. So your little mouse is like, yeah, I'm good, I'm better, I'm da da da. So your little mouse is on board. But then you're like, why am I not seeing results? It's because you're not talking to the elephant, to the subconscious. And so I believe, and what I've experienced is that affirmations are more powerful when you do them directly to the subconscious. And that's one of the things that we do in theta healing is accessing the subconscious brainwave, which is between 4 and 8 hertz. And then you're speaking directly to the subconscious when you're saying, I'm worthy, I'm entitled, I'm
I am.
deserving. I am, yeah. And you can use any affirmation, right? Because then you're actually planting the seed where it can sprout and create patterns around it. So I like to explain it in a way of, like affirmations are seeds. So are you throwing the seeds on the sidewalk or are you throwing the seeds in the garden of your mind?
Oh, I love that
Because
analogy.
one is going to germinate much more easily than the other. Now, eventually something's going to take on the sidewalk. You throw enough seeds there, it's gonna take. But when you throw a seed or an affirmation or a visualization or a vision or a desire into fertile ground, that's when it really takes. And so that's what I like to look at when we do reprogram the subconscious mind is we look at the structure of the soil. And I'm a gardener, so for me, yeah, exactly. So think of like how healthy is my soil? Is my mind a productive environment that's going to support the germination of the seed? And so one way that you can look at it without any training is what's your environment look like? Right? How do you talk to yourself? So you're that inner committee, like, is it positive thought or is it negative thoughts? Whenever you try something new, what's your inner critic got to say about it? That's going to show you the nature of your garden of the
Yeah.
mind. And also, what's your environment with your relationships with the people outside of you? How do you feel about other people getting promotions, the society, the government, organizations? Like, oh, well, I never get this, or I always get that. Right.
Right.
So, oh, what do you think? What do you expect to be easy for you and hard for you? That's going to show you like the pH of your soil.
Oh, that is such a great way of thinking of it. And I love the analogy of the garden because I am a gardener myself. And thinking about like what type of compost are you putting into or what type of soil are you doing? Where are you planting? How much sun are they getting? How much water? The reprogramming side of things and looking at ourselves as a computer. And I talk to my reps about this or people that I work with. We're in this go, go, go hustle mode, as you were mentioning earlier. We're constantly in go mode. And I say, what about your phone? When your phone is on 5 to 2% or getting very low, you usually plug it in. We're the same type of approach. Like you have to, for us, it's disconnecting, not connecting. It's disconnecting to recharge, which is counterintuitive to really all the things that are around us. And I think the brain really does love efficiency. It sticks to the same routine, thoughts, habits, unless we intentionally intervene. Let's just say someone if they want to create real change, like an actual real change in their life, but they keep falling back into old habits, what is that missing piece?
Well, the awareness piece is recognizing that that habit is a superhighway in your mind. And just as you mentioned, the mind is highly interested in and efficiency and conserving energy. So it's going to take the super highway of the old habit every day over this new, you know, trailblaze trail that you just created.
Oh yeah.
And so it's by default, you've got to consciously redirect yourself to the new habit. But for me, creating consistent permanent change happens in 4 steps. So really, first it's about identity. So if I'm like, I didn't used to run, I wasn't a runner, and I was like, oh, those, I don't get it. And then now I'm like, I got my first runner's high like this last year running, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I get it now. I'm a runner. And so it's changing your identity.
Mhm.
And then you begin to develop the neuroplasticity, because you're like, who, if I show up to I'm a runner, well then when I go buy my sneakers, I'm like, I'm a runner, and therefore I'm going to buy these types of sneakers.
Mm.
Then the mindset, you have to, your thoughts generate your emotions, right? So your emotions are going to be really telling. Do I feel like a runner, or do I feel like, a failure or not good enough, or, oh, well, I haven't run my first K yet or my first marathon. So therefore I'm not really, a runner. So your emotions are going to show you how instilled you are in the identity. And then that brings you to the actions, which is where most people will focus, but they tend to overlook the emotions and the identity. Because if you don't have those two, it's going to be hell trying to get to the gym, trying to get your sneakers on. And you're like, you're fighting this battle every time
That
because you
foundation.
don't think of yourself as a runner and you don't feel like a runner. So you're not going to act like a runner. So I'm just kind of using my progression as a runner. And then what happens is, as soon as you get those 3 pieces moving, then you create this energy, right? So um, that creates your momentum, right? So now I think of myself as a runner. I feel like a runner. I'm acting like a runner, right? I've got my little reminders and I'm tracking my speed and pace and all that kind of stuff. And now it's like I'm in the energy of it, which is the momentum that we're all looking for,
Big time.
that creates, now this is my new superhighway.
Mm.
And then the old pattern starts to become overgrown and disconnected, because as soon as you really begin to stop using a neuron pathway, your brain loves efficiency is going to start to unravel it and reuse those cells and that energy and that matter for something else.
Very interesting, because I think about so many different ways of getting to that momentum and
Mhm.
how people lose it, or the difference between motivation and discipline. Like there's so
Mhm.
much motivation out there, but I feel like, or like motivational videos and things like that, but it's almost cheap. It's like a
It's a quick
dopamine hit.
fix. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's not something that is rooted in you, that is going to make a big change for you. It's like, oh, I need a motivational high type deal, but what are
Mhm.
your disciplines behind that? What are you doing to cause that momentum to go in the direction that you want it to be? And I've battled with that through the years. I think everybody has, to a
Mhm.
degree, of understanding but I love the path of getting to that. And I think a lot of people will be able to take that away from this episode and put it into practice, because motivation fades. Um, Outside of awareness, so I'm
Mhm.
taking one leg away. Outside of awareness, what's the simplest overlooked strategy for making small changes that stick long term?
So this, if we're moving out of awareness, and this is kind of the domino effect, is uh, I would focus on emotions, because emotions are a really great port of entry that most people without any kind of background can tune into. You can, do I feel good about this or do I feel bad about this?
Mm.
And one of the 3 questions that I share with my clients, my students, is, when you look at the emotional body, is you can ask question, how do I feel? So this is a check-in. So your little meditation, or is like, well, I don't really feel that motivated, or I don't really feel like, because it's usually more like that. Well, why don't you feel motivated? It's like, well, I don't think it's possible for me. Okay. You're not think you're capable, right? So then you're getting, it's not just, if you're not motivated, that's not the reason. it's like you don't think of yourself as capable, you don't feel like you're capable, or you're not really clear on where you think you're going because it's not desirable enough for you to keep going.
Sure.
Right? Anybody can be motivated for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 days. But the reality is the goal that you're achieving is beyond that.
Right.
And so sustainable inertia comes from being crystal clear on the destination and being tuned in and attached and connected to that desire. And the desire is drawing you forward instead of the fear of what will happen if you don't do it,
Right.
because
It's
that
like really
fear is
knowing
going to
that
be
why.
very disruptive. It's you're going to be motivated whenever you start hitting that red line. So the second question is, the first question is, how do you want to feel? Second question is, how do you, or the first question is, how do you feel? The second question is, how do you want to feel? It's
Mm.
like, well, I want to feel engaged or committed or that I'm capable of this. It's like, okay, so what needs to change so that you can feel that way? Which is
Yeah.
the third question. It's like, well, I got to stop thinking to myself that I got to stop thinking of all the things that I perceive as a failure and start to really look at all the things that I've achieved. For example, like in that example of, I don't think I'm capable. Because a lot of people will look back and I didn't do this right. I didn't do this right. They'll give you the laundry list of all the things where they think they've failed. But what if we just reframe that and be like, okay, now give me the laundry list of all the things you've achieved?
Or even learned.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
instead of looking at failure, looking at it as
Hmm.
learning lessons, like what are all the things that I learned, and then tying that to the
Hmm.
things that I achieved. And I mention this a lot with the people that I work with. We get so caught up in your day to day, you don't realize how far you've come, whether it's a week, a month, a year, or even more.
Hmm.
And really looking at that growth over time instead of the instant gratification world we're in right now, where we're looking for those short-term fixes instead of
Hmm.
looking at it from a longevity standpoint of, okay, if I'm going to do something new, like I'm going to start a new endeavor, I'm going to work on a new hobby, it takes time.
Hmm.
And failure is, this is kind of a cliche term, but it's a prerequisite for success. And and you have to go through these learning, these dips to go, or take a step back to go two steps forward multiple times. And I'm sure in your previous life of the work that you were doing, same thing happened there. It's something that is rooted in the success, or however you want to define it, that we need to
Hmm.
go through for growth, so to
Exactly.
speak.
And that translates whether you're looking at business growth or personal growth. I like to think of as a tide coming in, right? Because we have the highest tides in the world, other than I think Japan is the other one. But when the tide's coming in, the tides will be like 80 feet high when they come in to where we are, but it's one wave in and then it goes back out. And then the next wave comes in a little bit more and then it goes back out. But like if you were to look at on a time lapse, it doesn't take very long for you to be underwater, which is why it's one of the risks that you take when you're walking on the shoreline. You always need to know what the tides are doing because it'll sneak up on you. And I think success happens the same way, right? I can't tell you how many times I've worked with clients and they're like, oh my God, I just realized I'm doing the thing we talked about last month. And it's just like, it snuck up on me. Like it's natural because your mindset has changed, your feelings have changed, your behaviors have changed. And next thing you know, you're doing the thing.
Mm.
And one of the things that I feel is an important thing that we don't do enough is, and what I call it is like my tickle file. So it's like, I write down like all of my results, all of my achievements, all my little messages from my clients that I get, because it's so easy to remember all the things that I think I failed on, right? That 1% or the 10% or whatever. But when we start to um, really observe the successes and create an easy way for us to review them, because they're so easily forgotten, I feel
Oh, baby.
that it allows us to be like, in those moments of doubt, it's a really supportive tool to have, to just be able to flip through something. So whether it's an electronic version or a physical version, whatever, works for you, is, are you reviewing your day, your week, your month, and your year and cultivating those wins
Yeah.
so that you can be like, hey, in those moments where I have this much bigger goal now and I'm like, ooh, is that possible? Well, just look back and look
Yeah.
how far you've come we tend to see the world through, well, look how far I have to go, but we don't often look how far I've come. Right. So that really can support us in being in being like, hey, I can do this too.
It's one of my favorite quotes, actually. Focus on your work, squint at success, and every so often look over your shoulder to see how far you've come.
Love
I
it.
I just hit my 6 months, 7 or 5 days ago since my brain surgery, and it's
Mm.
having that benchmark, even though it
Mhm.
was a crazy change in my life, having that as a benchmark to look at, or having these benchmarks and
Mhm.
looking back of like how much has changed or what has been accomplished or what have I learned in that time frame since then. So
Mhm.
maybe that's something that people can take away too, is find that benchmark to go back to and use that as a parameter to look at what is everything that has happened since that point. And then that could build momentum as well that we were talking about before. I want to talk about self-acceptance,
Mm.
that paradox of growth. A lot of people think self-acceptance and ambition really can't coexist. Either you love yourself as you are or you push yourself to improve. How do you balance self-acceptance with the drive to get better every day? Almost that 1% better every day.
Well, I think I love that you brought that in because I think that's such a social perception and paradigm is it's an
Mhm.
or. You can
Or
either accept yourself and be complacent, or you can be ambitious and you're not good enough because you're doing more. And so I like to look at a third option, which is you can be proud of yourself and recognize your worth and your capacity and empower yourself to create more. And I actually struggled with that for a really long time when I was working on the stock market because I had all the shiny objects. I checked off the all the things on the to-do list and I was like, why am I not more happy? What's wrong with me? And I felt really guilty
yeah,
that I wasn't more satisfied in my life because I felt very complacent, even though I had reached kind of a pivot, quite a bit of success in my career. And so that guilt actually held me back and kept me where I was
mhm,
because it's like I should be more grateful. So many people have way less. And I find when you look at the or, that's the pattern that I was stuck in is, well, I have this, so I should equal, I should be happy and
right.
I should be more grateful and I should be this. And so for me and how I would explain it is that you can both be proud of where you are and desire more. Because the way that I look at it is your soul is an infinite energy. And so it's just like growth. There's always room for more. So just because you're reaching for more doesn't mean that you don't accept and you're not proud and you're not grateful of where you are. And
Mm,
I find that there's this skewed perception of, why aren't you happy with what you have? And we tend to assume that that's what acceptance looks like. So for me, those are two very different terms. So acceptance is being an awareness and acknowledgement of this is what the current situation is, and having a desire for more. So
I
I would
love
look at
that.
it more of an and than an or.
You know what I always find so fascinating? Changing one word, what
Mhm.
that can do for an entire perception of how you approach something.
Mhm.
Failure with learning, like
Yes,
another great
exactly.
example, or changing it to growth. Growth
Mhm.
is the outcome that we're looking for here, not success. And I tie it back into as well the journey, enjoying the journey, because we're always so focused on that end result that we're
Mhm.
trying to achieve. We don't take a step back and say the process is where we really enjoy things and where we
Mm.
question things and where we get those dopamine hits and those highs and hit the plateaus and take a step back and then go two forward or two back.
Mhm.
But if you zoom out, if you're going up and to the right and you zoom out, you can see then what you've progressed on and what you've learned from over time.
When you think about it, the ultimate destination of life is death. So it's like, why are you trying to like speed your way to the end game, the ultimate destination in life is
Yeah.
right. So it's like life is about e- enjoying life.
Yeah.
I think that's true whether you're at work, whether you're in a relationships, whether you're developing or growing yourself, whether you're learning yourself. It's like, how can you fall in love with the process? Because then when you fall in love with the process, you're falling in love with life.
Mm.
And someone who's in love with life creates such a beautiful perspective and such a beautiful energy that it's a very efficient and sustaining way of showing up every day. It's
Right.
and so a great question to ask is how can I fall more in love with my life today? Because something that I've learned about the subconscious mind and or the universe, whatever your belief structure is as soon as you ask a question, the universe conspires to answer it for you. So it's like asking great questions and being like, how can I fall more in love with my life today? Because we
That
often
law
ask,
of
well, I'm
attraction.
always having this problem. Da 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 da. It's like, let's ask some positive questions, right?
Yeah.
How can this be more fun?
Mm.
How can this be more engaging? Because when you're in a good space, everything else works. I mean, I'm sure you've had that morning where you stub your toe and something goes wrong, you spill your coffee, and it's like
Spiral effect.
all day,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, so how can you start? What if you started your day with asking, how great could this get? And then kind of like want and consciously snowball that energy and that
Mm.
perspective and that expectation.
A practice that I started doing was waking up, don't touch the phone, because
Mm-hmm.
the phone, you're immediately going to other people's
Mm-hmm.
demands or their quote unquote problems. The list goes on.
Their
You're not
opinions, all the things, right?
everything. You're
Mm-hmm.
not going to yourself. Where the shift that I started working on is keeping that away from the first wake up, but then saying, "What am I grateful for?" I'm awake. As simple as that. I'm awake.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in my bedroom. I know I can go downstairs and get a cup of coffee and clean water. And then, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
the spiral effect of the negatives. You could do the spiral effect of positives, and I like how you mentioned too that energy that you're creating. I think it's infectious for the people around you then, and,
Yes.
and what you can do for others. When that could go both ways. I think we're in a world right now that is very divided, and there's people that are consumed with taking the positive energy approach, but also the negative, and they don't even recognize that it's the negative.
Mm-hmm.
And some people don't even recognize that it's positive energy that they're doing. So going back to the root of the beginning of this, like how do you have that awareness and really
Mm-hmm.
think about what are all the causes and reactions to get into it? I have so many questions for you. Like
I know we could
I
chat all day, I'm
I
sure.
remember when we first synced up, we were like, we could literally talk all day. So I want to be respectful of your time, but I do have a very big question that I want to ask you. You've gone through these different chapters of your life
Mm-hmm.
and changes. What does 1% mean to you? And I know that's the theme of this podcast, but I really love to ask you this question because I'm so fascinated with how your outlook on things, what you help people with, and what does that 1% better really mean to you?
I love that you asked that question and it kind of circles back around to what we've been talking about. For me, 1% is really everything because when you think about it, and having worked in finance, 1% compounded every day is so cumulative.
Mm.
And so when you show up and you give yourself that goal to simply be better than the person that you were yesterday, that is a level of growth and commitment to yourself that most people on the planet don't subscribe to.
Right.
And so for me, the way that I see the world and how I want to show up to it is if I show up 1% better, that is a new model of life that I'm teaching my daughter. And that is the legacy that I'm leaving in the world. And if I do that again tomorrow and the day after and the day after, and I show up at the best that I can, depending on the day,
Yeah.
then for me, that's what 1% means is maybe my 1% today is 85% of yesterday.
Mm.
and so on and so forth, depending on the circumstances. But if I strive to create that consistent change and I just keep that top of mind, then the world that I leave is going to be impacted by the life that I led and how I led it. And for me being a mom, it's like I know that I'm modeling behaviors and beliefs to my daughter every day. And so I look at it as like, if I embody that perspective, then I'm providing her with the tool to thrive in whatever the world's going to look like when we leave here, because who knows what that's going to look like. Right. So for me, it's the legacy that I want to leave, but also it's how I want to lead. And it's the tools that I want to teach, because as you know, our kids, they don't do what we say, they do what we do. And so for me, that's one of the things that motivates me is I imagine who is the woman that she is going to become and how can I influence and guide the best way that I can. And it keeps coming back to you just show up the best version of you as you can in every moment. And so for me, that's the 1%.
There's one little phrase, or not a phrase, word that you said, or a couple words that you said in there that really are sticking with me. Show up. Just show up. Because
Yeah.
like you mentioned, you're 100%. Yesterday might be 85 today, but showing up is so important, whether that's your health, your relationships, how you treat your own self. Just show up and allow yourself to have that time in all of those different areas. This has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you about all of this. Definitely have to have you back on. Before I let you go, where can people follow you, your journey, your teachings, everything?
Well, you can find me on Facebook under Anik Malenfant. I've got my website, masteringascension.com. And I have a free Alchemy of the Self program. So if they
Love it.
want to walk through the alchemy, the mindset, the feelings, the things, I have a quick 4-day free little program that they can walk through to really take what we talked about today and apply it to their unique circumstances. So they can find all of that. They can reach out to me on Facebook. I'll send you the link so that you have them in the show notes for our viewers.
Anik, thank you so much for coming on. Definitely looking forward to part 2. There will be a part 2. I know that.
Sure.
For everybody listening, thank you for tuning in. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the 1% Better podcast. Take care, everybody.